thought the snow was over. You were wrong.
Well, Halloween's over now, so it's time for the Christmas season to bombard us over the next 2 months. And immediately, we've got all sorts of Christmassy themed trailers to talk about, starting off with Netflix bringing out a trailer called That Christmas. And whilst it's certainly not as underrated as the Disney short we mentioned a little earlier last month, this trailer looks to be something truly special. Or at least I would say that because it is so undeniably British.
If you feel alone, Christmas can be tricky.
This is one of those rare cases where it's a big old British film with all sorts of British accents incorporated in it, much like you'd see from a standard stop-motion Aardman production, but it turns out it's 3D CGI stuff, and it's made by an animation studio that I'm a big fan of. Relative newcomers, Locksmith Animation. Now, we talked about them a good couple years ago now, with their one and only release so far being Ron's Gone Wrong, which I really enjoyed, and I've just come to find out they're actually London-based, so surprise, surprise, it's a British film. But rather than being on the big screen this time, this is set to go direct to streaming on Netflix, and hey, I don't necessarily hate that, but I am very on board with the vibes of this movie, as you'll see from the variety of clips I'll be showcasing throughout this video.
Everything was about to get
Flipping heck.
But beyond that, the more I dug into this movie, the even more interested I got. Not only is it great to see some cultural representation of my hometown, with a surprising amount of snow that absolutely does not reflect our country these days, and it's by an animation studio that I'm just super on board with seeing what they get up to, but there is one particular big name that is super attached to this project, which has all sorts of Christmassy, cultural, British relevance in the form of Richard Curtis. Now, I don't know exactly how well this is known internationally, but Richard Curtis is a big name in the industry over here, as they are the creator behind Love Actually. You guys know Love Actually? This is at least in Britain, a right cultural zeitgeist when it comes to all things Christmassy. It's an ensemble cast with a bunch of separate stories all coming together, but what it really nails is that core heart of the Christmas spirit at the center of it. It's a lot of romance stories and stuff like that, and this movie seems to similarly have that same goal.
Hi, Danny. Hi, Sam.
One of many quotes we've got to say together perfectly wraps up the vibes of where this story is going, as the director, Simon Otto, who we'll also get into later as another big name, went on to say, "This movie tells the story of a troubled Christmas, forcing a group of kids and parents to accept that you can't always plan life. Life is chaotic, relationships are messy, and traditions sometimes must be re-evaluated. And regardless of whether you celebrate Christmas or not, I hope that audiences will laugh at the family dynamics and identify with the universal truth behind most traditions. It's ultimately not about the rules and the expectations we put on these events. We tend to forget that what really matters is that we can be together with our loved ones." Mwah! Classic, wholesome, hearty. I am already on board, and there's all the more information to go on about. So Richard Curtis, beyond just making a movie back in 2003, a good 21 years ago now, is a screenwriter and director that's been involved in all sorts of other mainline romance movies, being involved in the likes of 4 Weddings and a Funeral, The Boat That Rocked, About Time, which is technically slightly dated because it's kind of time travel manipulation in a romance movie, but you know, you get the idea. But also did the screenplay for Yesterday, that random Beatles movie, Mamma Mia, and apparently the Mr. Bean movie, which is an interesting direction I wasn't quite aware of back in the 90s. Now, while this guy's big on hearty, wholesome romance stuff, they are also just a super extrovert when it comes to the industry, having all sorts of other big names that they regularly work with. Rowan Atkinson, of course, being an obvious example that shows up from the 90s onwards. But what we've also got is that director we mentioned, Simon Otto, who is also making their directorial debut this time as the director, but previously has also been involved in some brilliant animated projects like Love, Death and Robots on Netflix, the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy, and pretty much all things DreamWorks, to be honest.
Dad. Oh. All the snow.
We've also got producers Adam Tandy and Nicole P. Heron, who did Moana and the Frozen films. Now sure, that's just the basic crew members, but with this being a British film, that obviously means we've got to get important big names in every corner of the filmmaking process. So on the sound side of things, there's going to be an original, new, mainline song coming out, written and recorded by Ed Sheeran. Only the most famous musician of our current times, of course, and also, you know, he was in Yesterday, so you can kind of see how everything ties together here. But yes, he's written a new original song after seeing some of the early sketches and ideas for the scripting of this movie. Apparently, it's titled Under the Tree. It's the big Christmas song that's going to be bombarding us this December when you go to the supermarket. And when Sheeran was asked about the project, they went on to say, "It was just sketches and voices, but it blew me away. So emotional, yet so heartwarmingly funny. Like all Richard Curtis movies, I find since having kids, there's a real lack of great animated children's Christmas movies, so I thought this was such an amazing thing to make and put into the world." Side note, didn't realize Ed Sheeran had such grating opinions on animated Christmas movies, but hey, he's not far off. Hey there, thank you for making it to the halfway mark of this video. This is the quick plug today to subscribe if you haven't already. We'll do a review of this movie as well in a month's time, and cover any other Christmas trailers that come out this next week. Alright, back to the rest of the video about That Christmas. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a classic in waiting. The scene that we wrote this song for is so heartbreaking, but so real for many people at Christmas, spending it without the ones they love for so many reasons. I got to work with my older brother on this, which is such a rarity and a gift to work so closely with my only sibling. It felt so good to create something my children would watch with their uncle based in the country they live in. This is going to become a holiday staple, at least in our household. Hope everyone loves and enjoys the song. We had such a great time creating it. I mean, so far, practically everything I've heard, and I know it's the marketing phase of the movie, so it would feel like that, but I am so on board with everything that seems to be throwing around here. I think I agree on the fact that Christmas movies, they don't hit the same way they used to, and especially not for kids-friendly content. One of the reasons I praise Home Alone 1 and 2 so much, and not 3, 4, 5, 6, and rebooting the ripoffs, is because they miss that core emotional swell of what the real purpose of Christmas is, you know? It's not the snow, and it's not necessarily the presents, and it seems this movie has absolutely nailed that.
Mum, what happened to your hair?
Yes, it's nothing.
So naturally, every British celebrity in the modern world wants to get involved in the casting. What am I doing talking about the crew members? Let's go into the ones people actually recognize. Right up front and center, we have Bill Nighy, again, another one of those iconic characters that's just attached to Richard Curtis along the years. But on top of that, we've got the likes of Brian Cox as Santa, Fiona Shaw, Jodie Whittaker, Lolly Adefope, Alex McQueen, Catherine Parkinson, Sindhu V, India Brown, Zazie Hayhurst, Sienna Sayer, Jack Winooski, Rosie Cavaliero, Paul Kaye, Guz Khan, Andy Nyman, Kuhu Agarwal, Bronte Smith, Freddie Spry, and Ava Talbot. It's just, oh, and Rhys Darby as well. There's just a full collected cast. It's what Britain loves to do. They love to just clump them all together. Very Shrek. And it does seem to be that this movie very much has the same kind of format as Love Actually, where there is an ensemble cast with intertwining tales going on along it. Just now it's actually an animation, which I think is just brilliant.
Who are you talking to? You talking to yourself again, Sans?
And just to make this movie sound all the more solid when it comes to the writing, it's not just an original movie chucked out on Netflix as a surprise. This is based on Richard Curtis's own trilogy of children's books that he made, I think, in 2020. So it's also already been written, already been adored, and now is just being adapted into the 3D animation sphere. And visually as well, it just looks really, really nice. It is wrong climately. I haven't seen snow at the end of the year in at least 10 years, if not 20. We don't get snow until one day at the beginning of March or the beginning of April, and then never on like the 4th day of the month.
In charge. Yes! 8 kid-free hours!
But as for other quotes we have on the movie, one from Richard Curtis himself, we have, "I hope it's going to be a film that makes people happy, perhaps more than once. I hope it'll remind people of the joy and complexity of Christmas and some of the joys and comedy and heartbreak of childhood." And then there's a very special thing for me, that the film takes place in a town very much like my own in Suffolk. I hope they'll love the sense of the place and go away with a new, delightful, simple English world in their heads. I don't quite come from Suffolk, but I totally understand the vibes you have for that. From Simon Otto, we have also an additional quote about a little bit of the story and the tone they're going for, where they say, "We all have a Christmas memory where expectations were high and then things inevitably went utterly wrong. We all have our personal That Christmas, but in our story, it's not just one thing that goes wrong for one person, it's 3 intertwined stories that are all heading to a dramatic crescendo one memorial Christmas Eve."
A lot more
complicated.
And then there's all sorts of additional quotes about Father Christmas as a character and how all these different celebrities know Richard Curtis and have mixed around to make this movie come together. I think I'm going to cut it a little early, since the review will only be in a month's time. This releases December 4th, not Christmas Day or anything. Instead, we'll go right back to one of the original collaborators with a Richard Curtis project, in the form of Bill Nighy, who plays the town's lighthouse keeper, who says, "My association with Richard has been one of the most significant relationships in my life. Love Actually changed everything in terms of my career." And then talking about this modern role, he says that he's always wanted to be a lighthouse keeper. Across the board, this just sounds like a delightfully wholesome Christmas movie, which is the kind that I've been kind of wanting for years. Like, how have we not had another Home Alone 1 style good movie, you know? I adore Arthur Christmas, that's about as good as it gets, and it holds that spirit true. But to see Love Actually done again in a whole new spin with a nice 3D animation, with a new animation studio I'm totally on board for, really nice representation of some British cultural stuff, and all sorts of wholesome collaborators coming together, I think this could be a really special movie. And it's not even necessarily Christmas focused, it's just whatever you celebrate around this time of year, which as well is nice and inclusive to hear.
Get ready for that Christmas.
I am very much on board to see what it is that Netflix and Locksmith Animation come up with, and I'll be eagerly awaiting to watch it come December 4th. And when I do see it, I'll of course drop a review as well. So for now, my name's been Daz. Thank you very much for reaching the end of this video. Do tell me your thoughts on That Christmas. Maybe that's my only complaint. A slightly less appealing title if you ask me. And I shall see you in a little bit.